The wind howled across the high plains like it had teeth. Snow beat sideways against the sagging barn roof and drifted knee-deep against the corral gate. The ranch was silent, save for the groan of wood and the hiss of ash in the fire pit outside. Elias Hart moved through the dark with a lantern and a rifle, his boots crunching across frozen mud. It was the third night in a row he'd heard something. Soft, like coughing. Not cattle, not wind, something smaller. He rounded the far fence line near the east ridge and stopped cold. A child, maybe 10, maybe less, curled up beneath a slab of sagebrush, arms wrapped around bare knees, eyes sunken, lips cracked. The fire beside him had long gone cold, no more than embers and dreams of warmth. No coat, no shoes, just a torn deerskin tunic and a bloodied hand clutching a stick like it could fend off wolves. Elias dropped to one knee, setting the lantern down. The glow painted the boy's face in amber. His skin was dusted with frost. A smear of dried blood ran from temple to cheek. He didn't flinch. He didn't beg. He just looked at Elias and said nothing. "You got a name?" Elias asked. No answer. "You runnin' from someone?" Still nothing. Then a shiver passed through the boy so violent it rocked his whole frame. Elias looked down at his own coat, then his saddlebag, then the boy again. "You'll die out here," he muttered. The boy blinked once. That was all. With a slow exhale, Elias pulled his blanket free. The thick one, wool-lined, the only one he hadn't patched or traded away. He knelt and wrapped it around the child. The boy flinched, then stilled. For a long moment, neither of them moved. "You stay here. You'll freeze," Elias said. "You come with me. You better be quiet." The boy nodded once. Elias stood and reached down. The child took his hand. They crossed the frozen pasture in silence, the lantern swinging low. Snow fell harder. Every footstep vanished behind them. Inside the cabin, Elias stoked the stove until it glowed. He poured hot water from the kettle into a basin and set it near the boy's feet. The child didn't speak, but the way he peeled the blanket back and leaned into the heat was answer enough. Elias poured a mug of coffee, added a splash of whiskey, and handed it over. The boy sipped. His eyes stayed locked on Elias, watchful but not afraid. "You're not the first to run through this land," Elias said, "but you're the first to make it this far alone." Still no answer. Elias sat across from him. The fire cracked between them. "You hungry?" The boy nodded. Elias set a pan on the stove, tossed in salt pork and beans. "You ever heard of a man named Hart?" he asked. "That was me, once. Sergeant Elias Hart, 6th Cavalry." The boy froze. His hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Slowly he lowered the spoon and said the first word since they'd met. "Redstone." Elias went still. Redstone wasn't a name. It was a massacre, a forgotten one, unless you lived through it. His voice dropped. "Where'd you hear that?" The boy looked down at the blanket. "My uncle, he died in it." The room seemed to shrink. Elias stood slowly, crossed to the cupboard, pulled out the tin box where he kept old maps and letters. He wasn't sure why he kept them. Maybe guilt. Maybe proof that he'd once been more than this. The boy shifted suddenly, reaching into his own tunic. Elias froze. But the child didn't draw a weapon. He pulled out something wrapped in oilskin, small, flat, sealed. A letter. Elias took it with caution. No address, no return name, just a wax seal, a single arrow crossed over a star. "I found it," the boy said. On a dead man. He said give it to someone named Elias. Elias turned pale. He'd seen that seal before. Once. Years ago. He stared at the fire, the letter tight in his hand. Outside, the wind howled louder, a storm rising. Then something else. A sound. Hoofbeats. Dozens. Elias bolted to the door, threw it open. The boy stepped up beside him. The snow was thick, but not enough to hide them. Figures, silhouettes on horseback, lined across the ridge like ghosts. 100, no, more. Elias lowered the spyglass slowly. The child whispered, "They followed me." The rancher didn't move. He simply whispered the words he hadn't spoken in years. "Then we don't run, we wait." The wind screamed across the plains, and behind him the fire burned hot as judgment. By morning the storm had buried the corral fence and half the barn door. Elias dug it out with numb hands, every shovelful heavy as stone. The boy stood behind him, wrapped in Elias's only blanket, eyes fixed on the ridge where the riders had vanished into darkness. No sign of them now, just wind-sculpted drifts and the hush of a world waiting to tip. Inside the cabin, the coffee boiled too long. Elias poured a mug anyway and set it on the table before the boy. "You said they followed you," Elias said. "That mean you're one of them?" The boy looked up slowly. "No." "But they didn't shoot." "They won't." Elias didn't answer. Instead, he pulled the oilskin-wrapped letter from the mantel where he'd left it. He turned it over again, that wax seal stirring things in him he'd buried years back. "Who gave you this?" The boy hesitated. "Name?" Elias pressed. The child swallowed. "His name was Caneta. He was my mother's brother." Elias felt his stomach drop. "Your family's Diné?" The boy nodded once. "My name's Toe." Elias sat down slow. Toe. He remembered that name. Barely. A whisper from a campfire conversation with an old man who'd once fed him flatbread when he didn't deserve it. "You were there at Redstone," the boy said, voice barely audible. Elias said nothing. "You saw what they did." Elias's hand gripped the edge of the table. "I was supposed to keep them safe." The silence grew thick. Then from behind the stove, Toe reached into his satchel and slid out something crumpled. A folded, faded sheet of paper, stained at the corners. A wanted poster, weathered, torn, with Elias Hart's name across the top. Elias stared at it. "Where did you get this?" "It's been passed around reservation camps for years," the boy said. "They say you led the soldiers, that you burned the water barrels before the children could drink." Elias stood up so fast his chair scraped back hard. "That's a lie." Toe didn't flinch. "Then why haven't you told the truth?" Elias looked down at his boots. The fire cracked behind him. "I tried," he said. "Once, in court, they said the orders came from above me, that I had no say. But you didn't stop it." "No," Elias admitted. "I didn't." They stood in silence, the weight of the years between them. Then Toe said, "Why'd you give me your blanket?" Elias turned, looked him in the eye. "Because someone once gave me one, when I didn't deserve it." He walked to the window and scanned the white horizon. Still no movement on the ridge. But in the far distance, something else appeared. Small dark shapes, trudging through snow. Boot tracks, marching in from the east. Soldiers. Elias cursed under his breath. He turned to Toe. "You need to hide, now." Toe stood firm. "No." Elias grabbed the boy by the shoulders. "You don't understand. If those men find you here, I don't know if I can stop what comes next. They already know I'm here." Elias blinked. The boy said, "I saw their captain in the valley. He was the one who gave the kill order on my family. I watched him laugh while my uncle bled out." Elias felt the heat leave his body. "Captain Josiah Reeve?" he asked. The boy didn't answer. He didn't have to. Elias turned to the fire and leaned heavily against the mantel. His voice was low. "Reeve was my brother-in-arms. We rode together in the war, shared whiskey, letters, blood. He stood by me at Redstone, claimed he tried to stop it too." "But he didn't," Toe said. "No," Elias whispered. "He didn't." They stood in silence, snow ticking softly against the windows. Then Toe said, "If I stay, what happens?" Elias didn't have an answer, but he knew this much. The boy's presence was a match in dry grass. One wrong move and the fire would catch. "I've got a cellar," Elias said. "Trap door beneath the pantry. If you go down now, I can lie. Say I never saw you. And if I don't?" Elias looked him dead in the eye. "Then I fight men I once called brothers." Toe stared back. He was just a boy, but something in his eyes was older than the mountains. "I won't hide," he said. Elias nodded slowly. "Then we stand together." Outside, the boots came closer. Inside, Elias pulled his old revolver from a lockbox, blew the dust from the barrel, and loaded 6 bullets with shaking hands. Toe held the blanket tighter. Neither of them spoke again, because the knock came hard, and the voice on the other side, icy, controlled, called out just one word: "Hart." Elias opened the door slow, letting in a gust of snow and a breath of war. Captain Josiah Reeve stood at the threshold, boots polished, coat crisp beneath the sleet, as if the years hadn't touched him at all. Behind him, 6 soldiers waited with rifles slung and eyes scanning the ridge like they expected arrows at any moment. "Elias," Reeve said, voice as dry as old whiskey. "Heard your fire was still lit. Thought you'd buried yourself by now." Elias didn't move aside. "You brought rifles into my yard. That tells me you weren't looking for coffee." Reeve's mouth twitched. Not a smile, not quite. "We're tracking a fugitive boy," he said. "Diné, young, possibly wounded, said to be traveling north. You seen anyone like that?" Elias didn't blink. "No." Reeve looked past him into the warm cabin shadows. "You sure?" Elias nodded once. Reeve's eyes lingered too long. Then he said, "Mind if we come in and warm up? It's a long ride back to the fort." Elias hesitated. "Only room for one guest," he said, stepping halfway out and pulling the door tight behind him. Reeve smirked. "You always were stubborn. And you always asked questions you already knew the answer to." A beat passed. Then Reeve said, "Funny thing. Kid we're chasing, word is he's got something important. Letter. Names. Something that could stir up dust we spent years settling." Elias didn't move. Reeve's voice dropped. "That's why I'm here instead of the others. I figured you might understand what needs to be buried, for peace's sake." Elias stared into his old friend's eyes. He saw no brotherhood there, only calculation. "I haven't seen a thing," Elias said, voice cold. "And if I do, you'll be the first to know." Reeve held his gaze for a long, quiet second, then turned. "Boys," he called, "check the barn, the root cellar too, just in case." Elias's blood went ice. "You got no warrant." Reeve kept walking. "I don't need one. This is war protocol." Elias stepped down from the porch, snow cracking beneath his heel. That war ended 10 years ago. Reeve didn't stop. Elias drew his revolver. The soldiers froze. Reeve turned back slowly, eyes narrowing. "You really want to do this, old friend?" Elias's hand didn't waver. "The boy's not here." "Then why the iron?" "Because you're not here for justice," Elias said. "You're here to erase something, and I've done enough erasing for one life." Behind them, the wind kicked up, flinging snow sideways across the field. Reeve raised a gloved hand, and the soldiers backed off, tense, uneasy, fingers still twitching near triggers. "All right," Reeve said finally. "You win this round." He stepped close, leaned in just enough that only Elias could hear. "But if I find that kid under your roof, I won't be coming back with 6 men. I'll come with 20. And when I burn this place, I won't leave a nail standing." Elias didn't move. Reeve stepped back, nodded to his men, and mounted his horse. "Let's ride," he barked, and just like that, the snow swallowed them again. Elias waited until the last hoofbeat vanished. Then he stepped back inside and bolted the door behind him. Toe stood in the shadows, the blanket clutched tight around him. "You should have given me up," the boy said. Elias holstered the revolver. "I did that once before. It cost more than it saved." Toe looked down. Was Reeve the one who ordered Redstone? Elias didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. "I watched him shoot my cousin," the boy said. He laughed. Elias poured himself a drink. Didn't offer the boy one. He drained it, slow, then stared at the flame curling in the stove. "You were right," he said, "about Redstone. I knew it was wrong, but I was tired and cold and following orders from men who spoke soft, but burned hard. And I didn't stop them. You could have. I didn't." The wind shrieked outside. Toe said nothing, then walked to the trap door and opened it. "I'll sleep down there," he said, "until we figure out what comes next." Elias watched him go, the boy's bare feet vanishing into shadow. And for the first time in years, Elias felt the weight of a uniform he no longer wore. Outside, in the dark beyond the pines, torchlight flickered along the ridge. The warriors had returned, and they weren't alone. The fire burned low, and Elias couldn't sleep, not with torchlight dancing along the ridgeline like a line of watching ghosts. He sat at the window, revolver on the sill, eyes flicking between the dark trees and the cellar door behind him. The boy hadn't stirred in hours, but the world outside was shifting. Come morning, hoofprints circled the barn like a noose. Elias stepped out slow, rifle in hand, scanning the snow with the eye of a man who'd tracked blood through winter long before this. The prints didn't lead away. They stopped in place. Too many for a scouting party. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Back inside, Toe sat by the stove, eating cold beans with a wooden spoon. Elias watched him for a long moment. "They're waiting," he said. The boy nodded without looking up. "They're watching what you'll do." Elias sighed, sat across from him, and dropped something heavy on the table. The letter, still sealed. "Whoever wrote this, they trusted you to deliver it. They died before they could say to who." Elias slid it closer. "I think they meant it for me." Toe's eyes lifted, unsure. "Why?" "Because I helped cover up what happened at Redstone. Because I stood behind men like Reeve and said nothing. Because the truth's been frozen for 10 years, and now someone wants it thawed." Toe studied him for a bite, then pushed the letter toward him. "Then open it." Elias hesitated. I wasn't meant to, he whispered. Neither was I. With fingers that trembled slightly, Elias cracked the wax and unfolded the paper. His eyes scanned the ink. Line by line, color drained from his face. What is it? Toe asked. Elias swallowed. It's a death confession, he said. From Lieutenant Price. He names Reeve. Says he gave the order to torch the village, knowing the peace envoy was inside. Says I took the blame, but Reeve collected the promotions. Toe leaned in, voice tight. It proves it. It proves everything. Outside, a crunch in the snow made them both go still. Elias crossed the room in 3 strides and peeked through the shutters. A single rider stood at the edge of the yard, coat flapping in the wind. A scout, but not from Reeve, from the ridge, Diné. He raised a hand in greeting, then pointed, east, toward the river cut. Elias understood. They want to speak, he said. Toe stood. Then we go. Elias shook his head. Not with Reeve still sniffing around. I'll go. Alone. You're not going alone. The two locked eyes. For a moment, the age between them disappeared. Then we do it quiet, Elias said. They rode out through the trees at dusk, circling wide, away from the usual trails. The cold bit deep. Snow cracked under their horses' hooves like breaking bone. By nightfall, they reached a fire circle near the frozen stream bed. 5 warriors stood waiting, wrapped in wool and silence. At their center, an older woman, seated cross-legged, her braid long and silver. Her eyes did not blink when Elias approached. He dismounted, hat in hand. I am Elias Hart, he said. I know, she replied. Toe stepped beside him. The woman spoke in Diné, her words sharp. Toe translated softly. She says your name is still poison in some places, but the child lived because you gave him your blanket. Elias bowed his head. That wasn't charity. It was debt. The woman stood. Her presence was thunder beneath calm. Do you have it? She asked in English. Elias handed her the letter. She read it without flinching. When she finished, she folded it slow. Justice, she said, can rot under snow, or it can burn through it. Elias looked up. What do you plan to do? She turned toward the trees, and out of the dark came a line of torches, 50, maybe more, warriors, armed, ready. Toe stepped back, eyes wide. No, Elias whispered. No, this'll only feed the fire. If Reeve gets what he wants, he'll claim an uprising. He'll slaughter you all. The old woman didn't blink. And if we do nothing, our dead remain lies. Elias stepped forward. Then let me be the one to carry it. She studied him. Why now? She asked. Elias didn't look away, because when you give your last blanket to a freezing child, you realize what warmth is worth. She nodded, but her next words chilled him. Reeve is already here. Elias turned and saw the flicker of torches coming from the southern ridge. Not warriors, soldiers. Go, she said to Toe. Take him back, but go. Elias mounted fast, Toe behind him, snow kicking up around them as they rode hard for the ranch. By the time they arrived, Reeve was already there. His soldiers had surrounded the barn, and in the snow between the porch and the door, Reeve stood alone, rifle in hand. Smiling, this ends tonight, Elias. Elias climbed off the horse, slow, arms raised. Behind him, Toe stepped forward, letter in hand. No, Elias said. Give it to me. Toe hesitated, then handed it over. Elias tucked it inside his coat, then walked forward, hands still up. And in that moment, Reeve raised the rifle and fired. The shot cracked like a whip across the frozen yard. Elias dropped to one knee, wind knocked clean from his chest. Snow exploded behind him, and for a breathless second, he thought the bullet had missed. Then fire bloomed in his shoulder. He hit the ground hard. Toe screamed. Before Reeve could fire again, a flash of movement cut through the dark. From the trees beyond the fence, the warriors burst forward, silent, swift, and fast as wind over stone. Torches rose behind them, not as threats now, but as witnesses. Reeve's soldiers panicked, shouts breaking into the stillness, rifles raised. Triggers trembled. Toe ran to Elias, dropping to his side, trying to stop the bleeding with the same blanket the rancher had given him. Elias gasped, voice raw. "Don't let that letter burn." Then he passed out. The yard became fire and chaos. One soldier fired blindly into the trees, and the warriors responded with arrows, thudding into snow beside boots, not flesh. It was a warning. Captain Reeve stepped back, realizing for the first time that he was not in control. Toe stood now, the letter in his hand, raised like a torch. "Stop!" Everyone froze. Reeve turned slowly. "What is that?" "The truth," Toe said, his voice shaking. "Signed and sealed. Your own lieutenant gave you up." Reeve's eyes narrowed. "He's lying. Read it." Reeve took a step. Another? He was within arm's reach, and in a blink he drew his pistol. But so did someone else. Clara. She'd arrived without a sound, rifle aimed steady from atop her buckskin mare. She wore no coat, only her worn dress and a face hardened by too many winters. Elias had once called her the best shot west of the Pecos. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She fired once. Reeve's pistol flew from his hand as the bullet clipped his wrist. He screamed, staggering back. Clara dismounted, her rifle still raised. Toe moved quickly, standing over Elias's body, clutching the letter tight. "I came here to find justice," he said, voice louder now, ringing clear over the snow and smoke. "And I found a man who gave me his last blanket, even though I carried his judgment in my pocket." He looked down at Elias's blood soaking into the snow. "Your captain tried to silence the past, but I won't let it stay buried." Clara stepped forward now, rifle slung, eyes cold. "I saw Redstone," she said. "I lost kin there. I spent 10 years hearing you cowards deny it happened." She turned to Reeve's soldiers. "Anyone here still believe in his command? Now's the time to show it." No one moved. Not one soldier raised a weapon. Slowly, Reeve dropped to his knees and wept, not for guilt, but for defeat. Elias stirred, groaning, his hand twitching weakly. Toe dropped beside him again, pushing snow aside to clear his face. "You're gonna live," he said. Elias tried to smile. "Damn shame," he rasped. Clara knelt beside them both. "Help's coming. Stay with us." "I'm tired," Elias said. "So tired." Toe took his hand. "You bought us the truth." Elias coughed. "No," he said, eyes fluttering. "You carried it." Then his eyes closed again, but he breathed. Clara stood, turned to Reeve, and pointed the rifle at the ground between them. "We bury the truth here," she said, "but not the people." Toe nodded. They dug a grave at the base of the cottonwood, not for Elias, but for the lies he'd carried. Reeve sat in chains by the barn wall, watched by his own men, who no longer followed orders, only silence. The warriors stayed until morning, said nothing, did nothing, then vanished into the forest with the snow at their heels. By dawn, the ranch was still, and Elias Hart lived. But the man who rose from that bed of pain was not the one who'd laid down. He no longer wore shame. He bore it. The blood had crusted over Elias's shoulder like old rust by the time the sun split the horizon. He sat propped on a crate outside the cabin, wrapped in his own blanket again, no longer for warmth, but as armor against the cold of what he'd survived. His breath came slow, measured. Clara sat nearby, cleaning her rifle without looking at him. Toe was off somewhere with the horses, mending a broken rein. The boy hadn't left Elias's side all night, until now, and somehow that absence felt louder than the rifle fire. "I heard you went down swinging," Clara said finally. Elias grunted. "Didn't swing much. Got shot before I could even cuss." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, but it didn't stay. "You gonna make it?" "Don't know," he said, "but I'm not dying before I see that letter reach the people who need it." She stopped cleaning, the cloth in her hand, motionless. "I know a man in Santa Fe," she said. "Territorial judge, one of the few who ain't bought." Elias turned his head. "He'd trust you. He buried my husband," she said softly, "and never asked who shot him." Silence stretched between them. Then Toe returned, leading the horse with Elias's saddle strapped tight. "You're not riding," Clara said, standing. "I'm not letting that letter go without me," Elias said. "You'll rip your wound wide open. Then you can bury me with Reeves' badge." Toe stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll ride it in." Elias looked up. "That what you want?" Toe nodded. "It's not just your truth," he said. "It's ours now." The boy held out his hand. Elias pulled the letter from beneath his coat and pressed it into the boy's palm. "Don't let the law chew it up and spit it out." Toe smiled faintly. "I'll deliver it. Not to the law, to justice." He mounted with ease. A natural rider, built for movement, not roots. As he turned the horse west, Elias called out, "Hey!" Toe paused. "You ride hard, but if you see a hill with yellow flowers, stop there. Why, that's where your uncle's buried." Toe's jaw set, and he nodded, then kicked the horse and vanished into the wind. Clara walked over, dropped into the chair beside Elias. "You gonna miss him?" "I don't know him well enough to miss him," Elias said, "but I reckon I'll feel it anyway." A rider approached near dusk, a Union courier wearing crisp blue and a badge too polished to trust. He bore a letter, sealed in red wax, addressed to Elias. Elias opened it with his knife, read it, read it again. "What is it?" Clara asked. "Dismissal," Elias said. "They've stripped Reeves' command, quietly, no trial, no public shame. Typical. But they're offering me a commendation," he added. Clara spat in the dirt. "For what? Surviving? For not letting the truth surface any higher than they can bury." Elias crumpled the letter in one fist, tossed it into the fire barrel. He stood, slow, painful, but stood nonetheless. "I'm done being their excuse." He walked into the barn. Moments later, he emerged carrying his old uniform. He set it ablaze without ceremony. Clara didn't speak. She just watched the flames consume the past. That night, snow fell again. Quiet and clean. Elias lay in bed, staring at the rafters. Clara sat by the window, rifle in her lap. And for the first time in years, the silence between them didn't feel empty. 2 weeks later, the letter reached Santa Fe. Judge Ramon Echevarria read every word by candlelight in his study, his fingers trembling as he turned each page. Names, orders, maps, witness signatures, a burial ledger cross-referenced with troop movements. The truth was airtight and damning. When he finished, he looked up to find Toe standing quietly across the room. "You carried this all the way from the northern border?" the judge asked. Toe nodded. "And I'll carry it again, if it means they answer for what they did." The judge folded the letter with reverence and sealed it anew. "Then it goes to the governor by morning," he said, "and the war they tried to erase will finally stain the white walls of power." Toe didn't smile. He just turned and walked out into the street. The air warmer here, the snow melted into dust and wind. Back at the ranch, spring had begun to creep through the frost. Elias Hart limped through the pasture with a fence post over one shoulder, the wound in his arm stiff but healing. He moved slower, yes, but he moved like a man who had decided he wasn't finished yet. Clara knelt by the garden beds, coaxing shoots from the earth, sleeves rolled and hands in the dirt. She looked up when he passed, squinting against the sun. "How's it feel to not be a soldier?" she asked. "Like I might learn how to plant something that don't scream." Elias replied. Clara laughed once, low and real. From the road, a rider approached. Elias squinted. It was Toe. Older, somehow, in just 2 weeks. The letter was gone. In its place, he carried a worn satchel, a small flask, and a new scar across his cheek. He dismounted with ease and tied his horse beside the corral. Clara met him halfway. "Well?" she asked. "It's done," Toe said. "The judge sent it straight to the capital. They can't bury it now." Elias stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. Toe reached into his coat and pulled out something folded, then handed it over. Elias opened it slowly. Not the letter. The wanted poster. His own face, faded now, edges curled, ink bled by time. He looked at it for a long moment, then struck a match and burned it in his hand. Toe watched it curl and vanish. "You ever figure out what you are now?" Elias asked. "I'm not a witness," Toe said. "I'm not a fugitive either." He looked between them both. "I'm what comes after." Clara smiled, and for the first time, Elias did too. They stood together at the edge of the fence line, watching the wind comb through the fields. Nothing stirred. No riders, no smoke, no torches, only the sound of birds returning. Later that night, by the fire, Elias pulled the blanket from where it hung and handed it back to Toe. The boy shook his head. "It's yours." Elias held it out again. "I gave it to you once because you needed it. I give it again because I want you to have it." Toe took it slowly, wrapped it around his shoulders, then sat down, and for the first time in weeks, he slept sound. Clara kept watch, and Elias, without a badge, without a rifle, without any blood to answer for, let his eyes close too, because sometimes the West didn't just take. Sometimes it gave back. Justice rides fast, but sometimes mercy rides faster. There are moments on the frontier when a simple gesture, like offering a blanket in the cold, echoes far louder than a gunshot. Elias Hart had spent years drowning beneath the weight of silence, of inaction, of shame, too deep to name. But when faced with a freezing child, instinct overruled history, and that instinct changed everything. In Toe, we see not just survival, but the inheritance of pain and the courage to carry it toward something better. Through Clara, we see strength sharpened by sorrow and clarity forged through fire. And through Elias, we are reminded that redemption doesn't come from forgetting the past. It comes from facing it, bleeding through it, and choosing differently the next time. Justice in the West is rarely clean, but sometimes it arrives in the hands of a child, in the voice of a woman, in the quiet resolve of a man laying down arms to tell the truth. And in that, we find hope.